fine for self-defense and went to check. But again, no one was there. Not even a minute later, a vehicle pulled into the driveway. It was finally our parents. When I tell you we were spooked, we were terrified. Fast forward a few years later. I was homesick with the stomach flu. I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, when I suddenly heard the back door open and the sound of keys being placed on the table. I thought my dad had come to check on me, but when I looked, his truck wasn't there, and he texted me saying he was still at work. Even now, my sisters and I sometimes get weird vibes in certain rooms. There are times when we feel too scared to even turn on the lights. One night, I was home alone around 10 p.m., heading to the kitchen to make popcorn, when I heard shuffling, and something dropped in my sister's room. I froze, but quickly, I rushed back to the couch. Even my cat became more alert than I had ever seen him. I was so scared I started crying, desperately wishing for everyone to come home. Now I just pray, keep crosses around the house, and try to bring as much positive energy as I can. Hi Daisy. I wanted to share a story my dad told me that really freaked me out. He's from a small town in Guatemala called San Jose La Herrada, and this happened when he was about 15 years old. He came from a poor family, so to help out with money, he decided to sell silverware. It started out as a normal day. He got his silverware ready and headed out the door. He went to different houses like he normally did, but then he got to one house that looked very old, almost like no one lived there. Despite that, he knocked on the door. To his surprise, someone answered. It was an old man. He was very well dressed. He wore a dark royal blue suit, fancy black shoes, and carried a dark red cane. My dad asked him if he wanted to buy some silverware, and the old man replied, "I will buy your whole kit, but I don't have money right now. Could you come back tomorrow?" My dad was thrilled and quickly said yes. The next day, he headed straight to the house. He knocked on the front door, but no one answered. He checked again the following day, and the day after that, for a whole week, but still no answer. One day, while he was knocking, a lady happened to walk by and asked why he had been knocking on the door for so long. My dad explained that the old man who lived there had promised to buy all his silverware. The lady looked at him with a serious expression and said, "That house has been vacant for 15 years. Goosebumps ran down my dad's spine. He tried to make excuses, refusing to believe what the lady had just told him. But then he remembered something that didn't sit right. The old man was dressed in luxury that you wouldn't find in a small town where my dad lived. To this day, my dad still wonders who that old man really was. Hello Daisy, my name is Bella. I've been watching your channel for a while now, and I feel it's time to share a story. I am Native American and from a small town in Arizona called Guadalupe. I've encountered a lot of paranormal things throughout my life, but one encounter in particular really changed how I see the world. Ever since I was a little girl, I've known I was different from other kids. I would see things that weren't really there, or so I thought. I often saw shadows out of the corners of my eyes or even full-on ghostly apparitions. As I grew older, I started seeing things that I was told are called tree demons. I was always warned, just ignore them and they won't bother you. Anytime I visited my mom and went outside at night, I would see demons and other strange entities. Over time, I got used to it. On one occasion, I went to visit my tia and my primos. We were playing outside as the sun was going down when all of a sudden we heard voices and whistles. As a Native American, one thing we never mess with is whistles at night. I remember walking outside when something told me to look around. That's when I saw a figure with a triangular shaped head and a very strange face. I had always been told to never let them know you see them because that could attract them to you. So I walked back inside and pretended nothing had happened. Experiences like that kept happening for a long time. I was under the impression that these entities showed themselves to me because of what happened when I was born. I had stopped breathing, and for a brief moment, it was as if I wasn't really here. By some miracle, the doctors managed to revive me and get me breathing again. Turns out, though, that there was much more to it than I thought. Later in life, I had a big falling out with my mom due to some issues in the past. That's when my tia told me some disturbing truths. She explained that my mom had been practicing witchcraft and voodoo, not just on strangers, but even on my sister and me. She also mentioned they had brought someone to bless us and help remove the darkness that had been attached to us. When the person asked who had sent it, the answer revealed my mom's face. My tia explained that this was why none of my family came around my mom, because she would leave curses at their homes. When I started living with my dad, he stumbled across her altar when he went to pick us up. The altar had Santa Muerte and other items related to voodoo and dark magic. After learning about this, I officially cut off communication with her and haven't spoken to her since. Once I cut her out of my life, everything changed. I started feeling happier, and I was no longer in a depressed state. I stopped seeing strange things, and the sleep paralysis and nightmares went away. I now believe that being around her and all that negative energy had attracted darkness into my life and made me miserable. This is just one of many stories I have, and I would love to share more in the future. Hi Daisy, my name is Isabel, and I have a spooky story for you. This story takes place in Zacapu, a small town in Michoacan, Mexico. It was my first time visiting, and I had come for my tia's wedding, as well to spend some time with family. The first couple of nights were normal, except for one. That night, my cousin slept over at my abuelita's house with me, and oh boy, she was a bit of a troublemaker. We stayed up late watching scary movies until around midnight. My cousin suddenly had a bad idea. She wanted to go to the mogote. This mogote was a rocky area behind my grandparents' house, covered in moss and plants. It always gave me weird vibes. At first, I hesitated to go, but being 9 years old and easily convinced, I eventually followed her. My cousin, who was obviously scared of the place, made me go first. You had to climb for about 4 minutes to reach the top. While climbing, I slipped and fell on one of the rocks. My cousin, who didn't hear me, kept going ahead. As I got back up, I felt a strange, lurking presence, like someone was watching me. I nervously looked around and saw a man standing behind me. Immediately, I ran as fast as I could, twisting my ankle in the process. I glanced back and saw he was following me. I panicked and hid in a bush. The man was dressed in dark clothing, and it looked like he was floating. His feet didn't touch the ground. Then, to my horror, I saw him performing what I thought was an exorcism. He was standing over a woman with long, flowing hair and pale skin. She was screaming, blood-curdling, terrifying screams. Suddenly, everything went silent. The woman passed out, and my heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I thought they were gone, so I stepped out of my hiding spot, but the man was still there. Waiting for her to wake up, he spotted me immediately. I made eye contact with his red, glowing eyes. I quickly began to run downhill as fast as I could, the man following close behind. I didn't stop until I reached my abuelita's house, where I found my cousin waiting anxiously for me. She said she had waited for me at the top, but left when I didn't show up, assuming I had gone home. I was in shock and told her everything that had happened. We decided to keep this to ourselves, but a week later, we saw something on the news that left us speechless. The headline read, "Missing woman found dead in a mogote. Suspect still not found." Days later, my abuelita shared a chilling story with us. She said that when she was in her early 20s, she came home late one night after work and saw a man in dark clothing with glowing red eyes. He appeared to be floating and followed her. She said he roams at night looking for his next victim. My name is Kevin. Ever since I was little, I felt a strong connection to the other side. I believe I might be clairvoyant or have some kind of psychic ability. My family often teases me when I talk about the things I have seen, though my mom believes me at times. She is a very religious Catholic woman. This story dates back to 2002 or 2003. A little backstory. My parents are immigrants from Mexico, and they moved to Georgia from Jalisco, Mexico. The house they settled into was built in the 1970s, and it's incredibly haunted. They bought it 3 months before I was born in 1998. The original owners sold it to us after the mother of the couple, an elderly white woman, passed away in the downstairs living area. When I was younger, I had bunk beds. My poor mother anticipated me having a younger brother who never came. So I was all alone in my room with wooden bunk beds. To give you a visual, my entire room was decorated in Winnie the Pooh. Comforters, a lamp, and even a cute little nightlight beside the bottom bunk. The bunk bed had built-in shelves, and for some reason, the underside of the lowest shelf always creeped me out. On this particular school night, I refused to sleep in my room. I struggled to sleep there because I swore I heard noises at night, like something lurking in my closet. To make matters worse, my bed faced directly toward the closet, and sometimes the door would creak open on its own. So, being 4 or 5, I desperately begged my parents to let me sleep with them. My parents have never really been that affectionate and promoted independence, so they always fought to keep me from sleeping in their room. I begged, and I remember vividly my mom saying, "Ya van a ser las 11, vete a dormir." I hesitated. My room was only illuminated by my Winnie the Pooh nightlight and the hallway light. I told her no and threw a tantrum. That's when my mom warned me, "Si no te duermes, te va a llevar el diablo, eh?" To this day, I still don't understand why parents say this to children. But my fate was sealed when she uttered those words, almost like a chant evoking something in the dark. I personally don't think I was misbehaving. I just didn't want to sleep in my room alone. I wanted to sleep with someone. I reluctantly marched to my room, got into bed, and left the door ajar. As I tried to get comfortable, I felt eyes burning holes in the back of my head. I got chills. The hairs on my neck stood up. I slowly turned around and looked into the dark void under the shelf I mentioned earlier. There was nothing but 2 red dots staring back at me. In my panicked state, I got under the covers and turned back around. Unfortunately, the covers lifted the back of my shirt, exposing my back. A second later, I felt a stinging sensation. It hurt a lot. I ran out of my room, telling my mom that something scratched me. All she said was that I was being an escandaloso. I began crying. My older sister heard the commotion, got out of her room, and asked me what was wrong. I explained everything, and she didn't believe me until she lifted my shirt, exposing my back. There were 3 red streaks, like scratches. I couldn't have reached that part of my back. You could clearly see I couldn't stretch my hand over there. She let me sleep in her room that night, and I didn't return to my room for 3 days. My house is definitely haunted, and I have more stories than I can count. But this was my first real encounter with something from the other side. Was it a demon? What do you guys think? Hi Daisy, I'm from the Philippines, and our culture is very rich in mythology and scary creatures that roam during the night. I used to live in the province when I was young, before we moved to the city. I was always told to close the front door screen at noon because entities that can't be seen with the naked eye might enter the house uninvited. That always spooked me as a young girl, so I always made sure to close our front door screen every noon and don't recall ever skipping a day. One time, we went on vacation for over a week, and when we returned home, things weren't the same. I was about 5 or 6 years old at the time. I was playing with my puzzles when all of a sudden, our couch moved. It was made of wood and was so heavy that it had never been moved since it was delivered. So I was shocked when I heard it shift. There was a clear indication on the floor that it had been moved because the area underneath was much lighter compared to the rest of the floor, which was dark from floor wax. I told my grandma about it, and she was just as confused as I was. The next day, while my family and I were eating dinner, we suddenly heard our chickens scream as if they were being dragged. Keep in mind that our chickens were kept inside their small enclosures, which were always locked at night to prevent them from wandering off or being stolen by neighbors. My Theo grabbed his flashlight and ran outside since those were his chickens. He was in complete shock to see them running loose outside their enclosures. He clearly remembered locking them in, but when he checked, the locks were broken. Stranger things started happening after that. Our rice cooker would randomly get unplugged, delaying our breakfast. Faucets would turn off by themselves while we were doing the dishes. The shower would shut off on its own, and even our curtains would open and close without anyone touching them. It became clear that something was messing with us, and we were right. When we had gone on vacation, the person left to watch over the house wasn't aware of our custom. He left the front screen open the entire morning and only closed the door at night. We were shocked when he told us. Immediately, we sought out a local witch doctor to cleanse our home, and that's when we learned the truth. While we were away, a small family of entities had taken over our house because the open door made them believe they were invited to stay. Since the caretaker wasn't aware of our tradition, our home had become infested. After the cleansing, everything went back to normal. The little family that had taken up residence in our house was relocated to a large old tree in a neighboring village to prevent them from returning. Hi Daisy. In high school, I was goth, and my friend Lucy, who shared my style, invited me and a few other friends to have a picnic at an old cemetery near Altadena, California. I wandered off and met a thin, elderly man in blue overalls digging a very deep hole where there was already a grave with a tombstone, which was odd. The tombstone was so faded that you couldn't read the inscription, and there was fresh dirt piled on the side. I asked him who he was, and he told me he was the groundskeeper. I looked around and noticed the cemetery was overgrown and in bad shape. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, "There's going to be a funeral here today." He told me his whole family was buried in the cemetery, and that one day, he would be buried there too, while pointing at the grave he was digging. He then went back to digging and didn't say another word. I walked away and met up with my friends. I told them I had met the groundskeeper and they wanted to meet him too. We walked over to the spot where he had been, but he was gone. The grave he had been digging was now completely filled, and the dirt was all dried up as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. The shovel he had been using was leaning against the tombstone, covered in rust, looking like it hadn't been touched in ages. Lucy and the others didn't believe me, but before we left, we took a group photo. The next day at school, Lucy came running up to me. She told me that a white figure had appeared next to me in the photo. I asked her for a copy since it was a Polaroid, clear proof that I had talked to a real ghost. Not long after, Lucy transferred to another school, and I never heard from her again. Hi Daisy, my name is Judy, and I live in Florida. We live in a small wooded area that looks a little creepy at night, though during the day it feels completely different. I would like to share with you a paranormal experience I had one night as I was getting ready for bed. It all started one night after my family and I had finished eating a late dinner. After dinner, I washed the dishes and put everything away. That's when I noticed something felt off. The vibes in the air didn't seem right. I had a gut feeling that something just wasn't normal. I tucked my daughter in for the night, then closed my blinds and got into bed. That's when everything changed. I was exhausted after a long day and didn't notice anything unusual at first. I quickly fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a loud bang outside my window. I jumped out of bed to see what had caused the noise. As I reached for the blinds, I heard another bang, even louder than the first. At that moment, I felt uneasy, nervous about pulling back the blinds, but I gathered my courage and lifted them to see what was outside. To my absolute shock, I saw a tall, 7-foot dark figure standing there, staring directly at